was the summer of 1969. I was an Army prosecutor at Fort Benning, Georgia. I was sitting in my office and my supervisor walked in, closed the door, looked at me and said, "Have you ever heard of Pinkville?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And he briefly described what Pinkville was. It was a place on a map of Vietnam, and there had been an operation there.
Charges have been made that troops killed as many as 567 South Vietnamese civilians during a sweep in March 1968. A lieutenant has been charged with murder and a staff sergeant with assault with intent to murder.
By that point, the Army had conducted an investigation. Quite a record had been established. A lot of people had been interviewed.
Did Camp Medina say anything about what the company should do in the village?
He said that there wasn't going to be anything left alive in the village.
It was clear that many, many people had died. Old men, women with children in their arms, and babies. And they had been unarmed, they had been unresisting, and they had been, in my judgment, massacred.
Lieutenant Calley came back and he said, take care of him. And he said, I'm going to kill him.
When they were all just lined up and shot like that, it sort of reminded me of newsreels of Hitler.
There certainly appeared that there had been an effort to cover up what happened at MYLAI. That seemed to be clear.
Did Mr. Thompson mention anything to you about landing alongside of a ditch that contained a large number of bodies?
No, sir, he did not report to me any incident of a U.S. soldier firing into a ditch.
To bring a case like this, given its potential magnitude, it had to be solid. It had to be very strong. It had to be believable. And it had to make believable an event which nobody would ever want to believe. The question was, what was this scale that we were dealing with? How big was this? And who did it? Who killed these people?
Charlie Company was a cross-section of just your general basic young people at that point in time. We were from all over the country, you know, East Coast, West Coast, blacks, whites, Mexicans. There was nothing special about us. We were just your common, ordinary teen. I'd gone to college for a couple semesters after high school. I wasn't cut out for college. I went to be a teacher, and it was like, no, the wrong profession. Having grown up with being exposed to their generations, yeah, you felt it was basically your duty to go ahead and go to war.
My father was a battalion commander in World War II. I considered him kind of a cross between John Wayne and Steve McQueen or something. I did have a notion of what it was going to be like, that it was patriotic, that it was the thing to do.
I was born in Utah. Pretty typical Mormon family. I went into the Army right out of high school.
In the Vietnam War, U.S. Marines battled North Vietnamese throughout the day.
Vietnam was all around us. You know, it was in the press and talking about it in school. And we had a real strong curiosity. We wanted to see it for ourselves.
The artillery is trying to suppress a communist attack on Baker Company, which is about 5,000 meters to our front.
Aside from just the sense of adventure, I was caught up a little bit in the domino theory that it truly was a necessary war.
You know, when I first went, I was into the idea that I was going to free these people and stop communists from spreading. I didn't go over there to be a hero or nothing. I went over there to do my job. I first landed in Hawaii, I thought I was in paradise. I mean, 70-some degrees at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then they bust us out to Schofield Barracks, and there's banana trees and everything. So I thought it was paradise. Well, it didn't take long for that to end. The East Range, where we did most of our training, it was straight up and down, and it was a real jungle.
It's quite clear that in Hawaii, they excelled themselves in the jungles. Charlie Company was voted the best company in the 1st 20th Battalion. Their captain was almost a folk hero. Medina had come up through the ranks from a Mexican-American background. He related to the men. He was a hard man. He didn't give them an easy time. But they respected him, and many of them loved him.
The motto of the Army is follow me, and he was the type of individual you would follow anywhere and do anything for.
I found Captain Medina to be a very tough individual and very demanding. He wanted us to be something unique and different and, strong and capable and a force to deal with. Captain Medina came up with the idea that we were going to be called the Death Dealers. He wanted us to carry aces of spades, and every time we killed a Viet Cong, we were to leave the ace of spades on it, so that, they knew that it was from the Death Dealers.
Lieutenant Calley was platoon leader of 1st Platoon. Young lieutenants are not liked very well. Some are quite gung-ho. Some are quite interested in making a name for themselves. Calley was sort of a mixture. He wanted to fit in. I think when he found the military, he thought he found his calling. He found a place to fit in.
My first impression of Lieutenant Calley was he was always trying to please Captain Medina. He'd go out of his way to do things that were not called for, and trying to please Captain Medina, and that, to me, it made, in my mind, it made Captain Medina resent him even more.
Captain Medina would just call him a little shit or something. And he ridiculed Calley. He made Calley feel inadequate, and Calley was always trying to do things to show that he was a real officer.
By asserting his rank, he basically shielded himself from his men. He isolated himself. Rank went to his head, and that's a no-no.
For the first month, it was like, where's the war? We had a lot of free time. The lounges, the bars, it was really nice. We said, hey, I could do this for a year. We'd walk through the villages, mostly women, children, older people. We really didn't encounter anything when we went. It didn't seem like there was a war going on over there.
He would go to a village, set up a perimeter. Medics and doctors would come in, treat the civilians, and we'd sit there and play with the kids, and there was nothing else to do. We always had fun with the kids.
When I was young, I saw American soldiers. Whenever they came, they would gather up everyone. They would bring cake and candy for the children. Everyone would have some, and then they would let us go home.
I never would have imagined, never would have thought Americans would kill us. When my children came home and asked if American soldiers were killers, I said, no, Americans don't kill.
Nichols Barker was set up around February. Its real function was to try and break the infrastructure of the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong in that central plain of Quang Ngai province.
Quang Ngai province had a reputation for 300 years for hating foreign occupying forces, whether they were Chinese, French, Japanese, or Americans. They just did not like strangers coming in among them and then exercising military power.
Great areas of the province had been declared free fire zones. What that meant was you just kept up a constant round of the bombing of villages. The U.S. military loved to quote Mao Zedong, especially the saying that the guerrillas are the fish and the people are the sea. But their solution to that problem was to drain the sea.
Bullets can kill the enemy, but bullets can also make an enemy. They can manufacture an enemy. And I felt at times during my stay there that we were cranking out enemy soldiers or sympathizers by the way we treated the place.
Soldiers had thought they were going to go in there and be welcomed by the people whom they were going to save. Some of them I thought was going to be like going into Paris after D-Day. And what they encountered instead was hostility. Outright hostility and resentment from these people.
When I was 8 years old, I realized the war had come. There were many times when the American soldiers would set up operations around this area and raid and shoot. So my mother brought me and my siblings together and taught us to flee. Every night we had to crawl into the shelter to sleep. We had to avoid the American bombs and shootings. That was our misery. War from the American.
We started pulling regular patrols end of January, beginning of February. Once we started down to the Pinkville area, we started to lose people. They were being picked off one by one. This is when we got our initiation into the realities of Vietnam with booby traps, mines, snipers.
The Quang Ngai area was called Pinkville because on the military maps it was shaded a bright kind of shimmering pink. The color pink took on associations for us that went way beyond anything you'll find on some color chart. It meant the prospect of death.
Weber was the first member that we lost. That had a real impact on the whole company because we actually had somebody killed now.
We were down by the river and walking on the rice paddies, and we were going down to this village. It was kind of in a corner of the river, and we started taking sniper fire. Lieutenant Calley wanted us to go across the river to where that